Buffy's adult male allies, O'Leary does not last long. After saving Buffy from his zombie brother, Sam Hain's fear-inducing aura gives him a fatal heart attack, leaving Buffy on her own in a zombie horde. Back at the school, Giles comes up with a plan. They'll remove the curtains in the library, bait the vampires to lead them into the library, and leave, trusting the sun to finish them off. They trust that they have time to prepare because vampires can't enter without an invitation, but it turns out that vampires can enter public places freely. It's interesting because that ends up being the rule in the show, except that for some reason the school is supposed to be safe, and it's only unsafe because it has a sign that says, "Enter all ye who seek knowledge," which means curious vampires can enter freely, so they ended up matching canon by accident. Come to think of it though, they knew that the boy that Darla killed was killed by vampires and they found him in the school, so they should have known. The three carry out their plan well enough. After a tense confrontation, the vampires are trapped in the library, and the Scoobies go to meet Buffy. Meanwhile, Buffy fights zombies, and fights zombies, and fights zombies, and doesn't really make a dent in the horde. Sunnydale has a lot of dead people, including a chewed-up Principal Flutie in an interesting cameo. The zombies take O'Leary's corpse and tie him to a tree. This tree is next to some farmlands. The body looks a little like a scarecrow. At first I thought Sam Hain would possess his body, and then Buffy would have to fight a monster that looks like her friend. But no, there was absolutely no point to that. There's also a real scarecrow that comes to life and calls out to her. Buffy heads towards the field and becomes trapped in an invisible force field, keeping her in the boss fight. About this time, Giles drives Xander and Willow to the outside of the cemetery. Xander and Willow are horrified by the body, which they initially think is Buffy. Their reactions are very similar to the discovery of Dr. Gregory's body in Season 1, Episode 4, Teacher's Pet, and I like that emotion. These are not yet jaded warriors. They're kids dealing with true horror. They assess the situation and go into the cemetery to help Buffy and end up in the zombie horde. Buffy is trapped behind the force field, so the Slayerettes are forced to fight zombies alone, while she fights Sam Hain in what turns out to be a pumpkin field. I said before, and I'll say it again, druids did not have pumpkins. Sam Hain says that his zombies will kill her friends if Buffy doesn't face him, so she descends into the mass of pumpkin plants and comes across a living pumpkin-headed scarecrow, Sam Hain. In the same sort of way that the first evil is evil incarnate, Sam Hain is fear incarnate. Every time anyone feels fear, that's a part of him, and he is able to terrify Buffy just by being near her. It's kind of like the fear demon from Fear itself, played straight. Buffy tries to play it cool and mock the demon, but he's incredibly powerful. Like any internet debater, she finds it hard to fight a straw man. She can't make a dent in his flesh, and she ends up running through the pumpkin patch. Meanwhile, the Slayerettes fight zombies. Xander is surprised that Willow can fight so well given that she's a girl. He catches himself mid-thought though, and acknowledges that he's being sexist. He's certainly not Mr. Feminist, but he is getting better. They clear a path to a crypt, and they climb to the top. As Xander helps Willow up, it seems like she is about to assert romantic interest, but she chickens out and the moment passes. Xander tries to be a macho hero for a moment and not climb up, but he comes to his senses and climbs up. Like in The Walking Dead, these zombies do not climb. Once safe, Giles consults a book of magic and says a spell that's really a prayer invoking God, similar to the spell in Season 1, Episode 8, I, Robot You, Jane, and kills the zombie demons, reanimating the human bodies, which turns them to dust. Halloween Reign seems to envision zombies as similar to Buffy vs. vampires, which makes some sense.
Dust, dust.
Just before they turn to dust, Glenn O'Leary's clown brother sees Glenn's corpse and mourns him for just an instant before turning to dust. What a great use of a character. Giles then starts up another holy spell to help Buffy defeat Sam Hain, which involves a bunch of weird ingredients like deadly poison and apple juice. They don't have the needed apple juice though, so they use the spell to take down the force field so that they can get apples from a tree in the field. Meanwhile, Buffy's essentially a scared final girl. She's scared out of her mind, filthy, crawling through a pumpkin patch to get away from Sam Hain. She runs through an orchard filled with scary trees, Sam Hain on her tail. And then she runs into Giles and the others. They supply her with weapons, wards to repel Sam Hain, and good old emotional support. Buffy points out a barn that they could use to kill Sam Hain, just as Sam Hain shows up. The Dark Lord of Halloween mocks and threatens them, but Buffy stands up to him. Xander tosses her a crossbow, and she fires a bolt through his pumpkin skull and makes him chase her to the barn. She climbs into the loft and tries to hide in the hay, but a jack-o'-lantern spy camera catches her in the act. Sam Hain follows her up, but Buffy uses her lipstick to draw the sigils to repel him away from the loft, while her friends bar the door and light the barn on fire. Buffy then leaps out the window and leaves Sam Hain to burn. Sam Hain calls out that his body will burn, but his spirit will survive, and he'll make his move year after year until one day he wins. Buffy won't allow him to win though, so she grabs one of Giles' wards, attaches it to a bolt, and then jumps back into the burning barn. She struggles a bit with Sam Hain and gives the one-liner, "trick or treat," as she shoots Sam Hain with the ward to bind him into a scarecrow body.
Trick or treat, motherfucker!
Sam Hain gives a scream of "No!" and Buffy leaves triumphant as the Pumpkin King dies permanently. She then leads the Scoobies away from the burning barn so that Buffy doesn't get nailed for arson a second time. Giles makes a quip about how Buffy should never complain about a lull in demon activity, and then everyone laughs like this is a children's cartoon. The end. So that's the first Buffy tie-in novel. It is very sloppily written. I feel like the authors didn't really get the characters. There's that condescending thing about how Buffy is a bad student because she cares too much about pop culture, prioritizing the wrong stuff because they're working purely from a parental perspective and not a teen perspective, and not understanding the role of pop culture references as communicative. This shows up in the way references are used in the novel, where Willow and Xander seem engaged in some big game to reference things, more than using references to actually talk about matters at hand. More than that, the authors don't have a feel for the characters' voices. Willow says some cute lines that seem better for Xander than her. Bigger problems lie in the horror. I always got the sense that Buffy was campy because they didn't have the budget or direction for big serious horror, and that they would be scary if they could. And a few episodes were really scary. The novel medium should allow for more genuine scares than featured in the show, but they squander that potential to feature cheesy elements like a dark and stormy night, a living scarecrow, and a living jack-o'-lantern that just aren't scary. It makes me wonder if they were also confused about the age demographics for the show, and wanted to make something like Goosebumps, which would be scary for 7-year-olds, but not really for adults. Either way, I didn't really find it enjoyable. Then there were elements like O'Leary that didn't really go anywhere. He's a red shirt, but it feels like there should be more to him. How does he know about the zombies? Why have the zombies string him up like a scarecrow if nothing's done with him? What's the deal with his brother in the clown suit? My first inclination is that the authors were simply being lazy, but maybe they originally had him as more significant and then sloppily rewrote it. Why do Buffy and O'Leary feel a connection when they first meet? Maybe in an earlier draft, he was actually a reincarnation of Timothy Cassidy, the Watcher who helped defeat Sam Hain the first time, while Buffy would be a reincarnation of the Slayer Aaron Randall, and they would together defeat Sam Hain in this time in parallel to the past adventure. Possibly Joss would have stepped in and said that reincarnation is more of a thing of the movie, not the show, and then they rewrote it. Just some speculation on my part. Either way, the O'Leary we get is really half-baked. Feminist-wise, it's good but not great. It accurately depicts themes of female empowerment and the mixing of teen girl interests with saving the world from supernatural threats. Xander is in a state of character development where he's not so feminist, and the book accurately depicts that while showing him improving. He doesn't get too far, but in a tie-in novel, you can't shake up the existing show dynamics, so it's forgivable for the medium. It's the slut-shaming aspects to make it carbon-dated, and the condescension about Buffy's love of pop culture is annoyingly disrespectful to her character. So far, I'm not impressed, but I trust that the tie-in novels will improve as time goes on. Next book, Coyote Moon by John Vornholt.